when you build a house, if you don't have a good foundation, everything you build, no matter how beautiful and how perfect, is not going to be stable and well designed because it's on unstable ground.
Mm-hmm.
So these early years serve as the foundation to build your personality on.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Soul Sessions with Creative Mind. I'm Deborah Barrett Maldonado, and I'm here with Dr. Rob Maldonado, and we are excited to bring a new series to you about the relationship with our mother. Really wonderful, the mother archetype. And we're going to talk about the development of ourselves early in life and how that relationship with our mother and this divine feminine through this whole series impacts your personality and impacts your life in both work and love. But before we get started, please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, whether you're watching us on Spotify, iTunes, or YouTube. Just click on the subscribe button and be sure to not miss another episode. So, Rob, let's talk about today the roots of your life in work and love, this personality roots that we're talking about today. And it all has to do with the mother archetype.
Yeah, so where does it all begin? We thought we'd take a slightly different approach and look at Erikson's stages of development, but through the lens of that relationship with the mother.
Mm-hmm.
We know the mother plays the role of the primary relationship in everyone's life. And here we think of mothering, not so much your biological mother, but anyone who takes care of you.
So it could be your adopted mother, it could be your grandmother, it could be aunt, someone who is there for you. Big sister could be a mother.
Yeah.
Mother type.
Your father could be your mother, essentially.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Single fathers.
Mothering is an activity, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the taking care of someone, bringing them up. So Erikson had an interesting model. He did come from the psychodynamic schools, meaning that school of Freud and Jung, and kind of thinking of the mind in this very fluid way, that it's interacting with the family, with society, with culture. And so he begins this idea that the first stage of development, usually, and it's considered from 0 to a year and a half. So the first 18 months. Yeah. He says this stage is the establishment of trust versus mistrust. And
that's a huge thing.
Absolutely. We can think of it as a spectrum, right? It's not black or white. It's not you're either going to have trust or completely mistrustful, but somewhere in that spectrum, depending on your relationship with your mother, especially, you're going to establish that foundation for developing your sense of self.
So some examples of trust or mistrust. I often hear the question, and I'm not a parent, but I hear this a lot, is should you leave your baby crying or not? Should you always, give them everything they need? And so as a child psychologist, what is the rule on that? Because it's always the debate.
Yeah. Yeah, so I came up in a model or a perspective, a point of view that says culture is really important. And we can see, because cultural norms and cultural expectations play a big role in something like that. So that if you're in a culture where it's expected and it's appropriate and it's part of the culture to not pick up the baby when they're crying, right? To kind of foster some independence through that mechanism, then it's perfectly fine, because everyone kind of feels okay with it. And it's not a big deal. There's
not a lot of anxiety around it. Like, I'm doing it because I read it in a book that I should let the baby, but I'm feeling guilty. And so there's, like, the baby can pick up the mother's energy around it, or the people around them's energy.
Yeah, that we learn through osmosis. We are picking up information continuously. Our brain is designed for that, and so on the contrary, if it's not okay in the culture to leave a baby crying, and you're trying out some new experimental technique, and like you say, the mother's anxious about it and doesn't really feel okay with it, but feels compelled to do it for some reason, then the baby's going to pick up on that.
Or even the mother going through that battle where sometimes she does pick them up and sometimes she leaves them cry and it's inconsistent. Wouldn't that also cause that underlying trust is someone going to be there for me when I cry?
That's right. So let's back up a little bit, because this is an important kind of understanding to have about what's going on in those early months, the first 18 months of life. So we know from neurodevelopmental research, the brain is overproducing neural connections. Overproducing. I mean, big time. It's like growing at fast speeds and overproducing these connections in order to be ready for whatever comes its way. It's like being prepared for anything, essentially. The baby, as far as the senses, it appears that they're sleeping and not tuning into anything, but that's not really what's happening. They're listening to everything. They're tuned into the mother's emotions. They're synchronizing their brain waves with the mother or anybody that cares for them.
Very interesting.
Yeah. A lot of stuff going on internally that, if you just look at them, you say, well,
they're sleeping right now.
Yeah,
they're just
not doing
looking
anything
at the ceiling.
But they're learning, they're absorbing the environment continuously.
If you ever see a baby, their eyes are always darting around and checking out everything. And
yeah, the research shows they were able to focus on faces very early on. Sometimes, like that day they're born, they can focus on a face more than an abstract image or figure. And so there's a lot of intelligence already born into or with the baby.
There's that famous, it was on YouTube, that baby, the mother was singing this sad song and the baby was crying because the mother was feeling this, like the sadness of the song, and the baby didn't understand the words, obviously, but can pick up the subtle emotional state of the mother and like feeling the sadness. And so if the mother's holding anxiety, not speaking it, but holding it, or depressed or angry or joyful, the baby will basically synchronize with the brain will synchronize with the mother, and the baby will learn about the environment through that interaction.
Yeah, if you think about the gestation period, that those 9 months that the baby's in the belly, that's not really the end of the gestation period, because when the baby's born, they're completely helpless. They're dependent on the mother for everything, for food, for comfort, for safety, everything. If you look at some animals in nature, they're born and within a few minutes they're ready to run and just take off.
A minute later, they stand up on their little legs, the horses, and
deer and
even puppies. They find their way and walk around.
So
that
essentially, when the baby's born, they're still developing rapidly, just as if they were still inside the womb, but they're inside the emotional womb of the family.
Ooh, that's interesting. I love that term, the emotional womb. Yeah, it's like a container for the space for that child.
And whatever the mother feels, like you were saying, the baby feels. And so mothers sometimes would ask me, what's the best thing I can do for my baby? I would tell them, best thing you could do is be happy, because happiness communicates, it's going to be a great life, and you're going to have a great time. And it just kicks in all those great neurotransmitters that we thrive on.
So what cultivates trust at that age for the baby to develop a healthy sense of trust? And like you said, it's a spectrum. It's not trust or no trust, but there's a spectrum. And you can ask yourself as an adult, how much do I trust the world? How much do I trust myself? That on a scale like a 1 to, the spectrum, are you on the low scale or the high scale? Are you more in the middle, maybe sometimes? And it has to do with this very important 18-month stage. And so what type of things, besides like the mother not picking them up or feeling anxious, what other reasons would or events could happen that would pull mistrust or make a child cultivate mistrust?
Yeah, well, we know from all kinds of research that consistency is really important for our sense of safety, our sense of security, meaning, can we trust the world or not? So the more rhythm, the more pattern, the more consistency we can build into the baby's experience, the better.
So what if the baby, let's say, for example, the baby, the parents get divorced, really, like when the baby's born or the father leaves, and then there's that kind of sharing of custody, and there's like a, mixture of, kind of
that
taking
doesn't
care.
happen
It
these
doesn't
days.
happen. No, but that would be one of the. I don't know. With the mother's here, then she's not, and that could be an issue.
Yeah.
And then what about
So in a situation like that, we can say that the baby's going to have an emotional imprint of that disruption of the pattern, right, of the consistency, but it won't be a cognitive one. In other words, the baby is not thinking at that point, oh, there was a terrible divorce in my family, but they feel it. So whatever the emotions, especially the emotions of the mother, because remember, she's the primary relationship that the baby has. If the mother is sad or depressed, shuts down, is, just kind of distracted because of all that, that's going to impact the development of the baby.
What about the mother having like serious, like bipolar, like where they're some really depressed or really high, and it's like an inconsistent, not being there, maybe they're there all the time, but emotionally they're either shut down or up and down, and the baby doesn't know what to expect? That also would be?
Yeah, well, it would depend on what else is going on around the baby. So
if there's a loving grandmother, then
exactly.
Yeah.
We're very resilient as human beings. I mean, we're survivors. That's why there's almost 8 billion of us on the planet. We are designed for survival, and all we need is one person in our environment that is sane and it gives us a helping hand, and we'll make it.
Just one sane person in the family. That's a lot to ask from.
I know. These days it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all we need. One sane person to model for us that, hey, it's going to be okay, and communicate to us that.
And so how does that develop into a persona? Like what kind of personas? We talk about personas in Jungian psychology, where we have an ego and creates kind of a personality that is social personality. So that person who is more on the lower scale of trust, more on mistrust, they would probably be more ask a lot of questions, be more hesitant to trust other people. Like it takes a long time to get close to you, not take risks, look for everything in writing, that kind of thing. Like I need this in writing, and almost reinforcing everything as always like feeling like you're going to get swindled out of something. And then someone who's high trust would be someone who's just kind of like assumes the best of everyone. That's kind of, I feel like I was shocked at the world, because my mother was always there for us. So I always felt like I always expected the best of people. And I was always like, wow, disappointed that people were not nice sometimes, so but early on, that foundation of just being willing to give people that, like, kind of starting from, I assume they're good, versus the other part was like, I don't know if they're going to hurt me or not. How would you say the personality?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because I've memorized this list in this paper here that I wrote down. Let's see. So if the person develops mistrust, meaning when they cry, nobody comes and picks them up, or it's it's spotty. Sometimes they come, sometimes they don't, which is sometimes it's even worse to have an inconsistent reaction than to have one that's they never come. Anyway, so the mistrust one, it would express itself as in adulthood now as someone who avoids relationships, someone who is suspicious, closed, guarded, unwilling to let others go, meaning needy in relationships. We don't see people like that,
Why
of
are you
course.
looking at me?
Maybe a loner, someone who is unhappy, someone who makes poor eye contact. Yeah, they don't look at people in the eye when they're speaking.
It's too intense for people.
Yeah. Does not share self or possessions.
So you see this with kids, the ones that don't share their toys. Would be from that?
Well, yeah. In development, of course, the person is developing. So you never say they're going to be like that for the rest of their life because they're still in the process of development. But in adulthood, you see some of those things get pretty hardwired in there. Now, we used to think once they're hardwired, that's it, you're done for. But now we understand the thing we call personality, the thing we call the hardwiring of the brain, it can certainly and definitely be changed through learning, through active participation in your own re-educating of your social skills, your sense of self.
So that clingy, needy is almost like you're looking for everyone to, looking for a way to hang on or to prove that they're going to be there for you. Like it's almost like a clingy, I need you to prove to me that you love me. I need to prove to me that you love me, because you don't really have that consistent. And then on the opposite end, you really are kind of have relationships where if someone, like a friend, doesn't call you in a while, you don't go, oh my God, she hates me. You're just kind of like, yeah, she has her own life. It's like a normal way of letting people in and out of your life versus clinging on.
Yes. So let me read that list. So if somebody develops trust, meaning everything goes your way, everything goes as good as possible, right? We know there's no perfection, but there's pretty good, loving, consistent relationship with the mother. The mother takes care of you, is reasonable, sane, all that. You express your trust this way. You invest in relationships. You're open, not suspicious in your attitude towards others. You let people go when they need to go. You welcome touching, meaning you're affectionate. You're okay with affection. You have good eye contact, and you share yourself and your possessions. And in kids,
and also yourself, emotionally, right? You share your feelings. You share who you are, and you're open. That kind of openness.
That's the openness. Yeah, you're not guarded. And it's actually a personality trait that most personality
the big
tests measure in some form or another.
So as an adult, how open you are, or how shut down you are. Why is this important for coaching? For coaches, is that a lot of times someone will tell you, I don't trust anyone anymore because my ex-husband cheated on me and I shut down after that. And I was so trusting before then. But what happens is, as we know, unconsciously, we have that mistrust already. So we pick someone who will confirm that mistrust. And so we think that person is the cause, but actually the cause is early on, really from this first stage. And if a coach knows that, they're not going to be looking at the symptom or this expression of that adult pattern and trying to have them, overcome that, but really get to the deeper root of what's really going on here. Really going on is you don't trust the world. And I think people would have a more profound change if they get their head out of this one personality ruined my life, this one person, versus this is how I see the world and how I can change.
Yes, and so keep in mind we're talking very early on. These are the first 18 months of life that establish this sense of trust and mistrust. So it plays out unconsciously. So you might have developed a great personality later on and develop compensation skills and all these abilities. But if that was your early experience, you can pretty much bet it's still in there at some level of your neurobiology and your psychology. It's still in there. The good news is, again, that we're very resilient, that most of us make it and develop our personality pretty well and go on to become useful citizens. But it's always good to understand what are the roots of my attitude towards life, my personality.
Your attitude towards life. I like that.
Yeah.
And then the emotional womb that that those are great. And then this is really where we create hope. We establish hope.
We establish hope early on.
Early on, that first year.
Yes.
Because imagine, I would say that you're this being, everything's new and fresh, and you're coming into this world. Is it a warm, welcoming world, or is it inconsistent? And it's like cultivating hope, like that kind of, wow, this life's going to be exciting, or, oh my God, where am I and why am I here, kind of thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And also for parents, it's important to understand this so that they understand what can I do for the kid to give them better opportunity, right? A better chance at developing appropriately. So the second stage in Erikson's model is autonomy versus shame. Now, shame is a big buzzword nowadays, and it's an important one. But here we're looking at from about 18 months to about 3 years of age. So still pretty early on. And most kids aren't in school yet. Maybe they might go to pre-K or something, but they're still home playing around, just kind of being kids.
And they're able to walk now. Yeah. They're able to play with on their own. They're not like needing mother there all the time. So it's a natural stage of autonomy to start, playing by yourself and, figuring, the puzzles out.
Yes. And you start to see that attachment pattern. Is it secure or insecure? How do they react to that beginning to wander away from the mother?
How much do they let the mother go away? Interesting. One of my niece, when she was little, we went to a party, and I noticed the kids are around 4 years old, so it's a little younger, a little older than this. But I noticed that all the little girls were playing on their own at the party, and this one little girl, she was probably around 3. She was sitting next to her mother, and all the kids were like super hyper, like on candy and everything. And the mother was really mellow, and the little girl sat next to her. And while all the kids are playing, the little girl just the same stance as the mother, and just sat next to the mother and was just like an adult watching. And so that's that no autonomy, right? They don't go out and play with kids. So with that child, I don't know what, she's probably in her 20s now, grow up to be more of a shy, maybe even connected to the mother in some way, more not really developing her own personality, or...
Yeah, but it all depends, right? Because there's so many factors playing into an individual. We can never really make blanket statements, but these models help us have a framework on which to compare what's going on with the individual. So
my question is, the autonomy, does that have to do with also personality style as well? Do they mimic the parent, or do they start developing their own kind of way of being?
We can certainly think of these early stages as the foundation of personality. The foundation meaning, the roots of it. Where do we build our personality on, or what do we build our personality on? On these deep emotional kind of sense of who we are and what we can expect from the world.
And related to the mother at this stage, is it the shame is that if you make a mistake, you get punished type of thing?
Yeah.
Like, where does shame come from?
Well, if you think about what is the opposite of shame, certainly autonomy, meaning like I'm confident enough to be in the world and I'm not I'm not ashamed of who I am and where I come from and all that. So you start to get a sense of what it's talking about, that if you feel okay with yourself, if you feel like you can trust the world and you can trust yourself in the world.
And you're willing to make mistakes even?
Yeah, you'll get over it, right? In other words, you're not perfect. You're not expecting to be perfect. You're not expecting the world to give you everything, but you feel that, yeah, if you're for a kid, right? If you go out into the playground or a park where there's other kids, that you can hold your own. You know who you are. You know what you like, and you can interact with others and be okay with that. Versus a kid who's shy, cannot do anything.
Clings to the mother, like I was saying.
Clings to the mother, cannot wander away from the mother, is too insecure to go any distance from the
Is that where bullying too? Like, I guess 3 is a little young for bullying. I think that happens more in grade school. But I particularly, what about punishment for the parent? Like how the parent punishes the child? Do they let the child make mistakes? We hear the helicopter parent where they want to like bulldoze the kid from having any problems, or helping them with their preschool homework, and, not letting the child make its own mistakes and then allow him to not be shamed around it.
Yeah, again, it depends on the culture. And each family, of course, has their own unique culture as well. Regions in the U.S. or other countries, ethnic roots that go back generations, whatever that culture is, if it's okay in the culture, it's okay. It's usually okay with the kid, and the kid does fine. If it's not okay, if it's something that they feel like my other peers are not subjected to this, but I am, then you start to get kind of problems.
And so the relationship with the mother, how does the mother foster autonomy versus shame or pride? Is it being encouraging, but watching, but letting the child make its decisions?
Yeah, again, it's a spectrum.
Yeah.
And so each child is different, and that's another difficult part of family psychology, is that no one rule applies to all the kids or all parents. So the best thing they can do is to treat each kid as an individual, just like we do
like different
in work settings.
Even the siblings, like some siblings are going to be naturally more autonomous because of genetically. Yeah. Would it be a genetic thing as well, part of it?
Genetics, epigenetics, personality traits, intelligence level, birth order, on and on, right? There's so many factors that play into how we experience the world. But again, these models give us a sense of how to proceed. So at this stage of development, we know now the brain starts to prune those extra connections that it was making, because it starts to say, okay, I get a sense of what the world is about and what I can expect. So if the kid starts, the parents read to the child, the brain goes into overdrive to keep those neural connections designed for reading and strengthen them, and gets rid of the other motor activities or the extra ones that aren't needed for reading. It does that with all these activities that go on at this stage. So what becomes important to us, it has its roots in these early experiences. Wow. How we play, how we imagine the world.
So someone who's wants to try new things, that the brain in development would have those parts open. I don't know how to say it because I'm not a neuroscientist. So in layman's terms, those structures of the brain will be active because it has to troubleshoot more, versus someone who's kind of doesn't have to make decisions on their own.
Well, at this age, kids aren't really making decisions on their own. The decisions they're making are kind of, do I play with the red truck or with...
Still a decision.
Yeah.
And so this is really where the will is born?
Yeah, but the will, we can say, or the foundation of
Yeah.
what we call free will, or the way we will our life moving forward, is in this stage that we start to get a sense of, oh, there's other kids besides my family unit, and there's other families, there's other
You go to that
people outside.
kitty birthday party and you see the dynamics there.
Yeah.
And so the development of the personality, what is the difference between the two? If they're coming up with shame and doubt, how does that show up in an adult?
Right. Yeah, so let's say if somebody falls on that spectrum into the shame area, they express their personality as procrastination, has trouble working alone.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, they're a codependent, kind of?
Kind of. They need structure and direction. Has trouble making decisions, again, because of the will, right? Is easily influenced by others.
Ooh.
So they become followers, not leaders, right? Because they have to kind of wait to get permission
They,
from
like,
others.
again, don't trust their own decisions. They have to kind of follow the sheep,
Yes.
the herd.
And may become embarrassed when complimented. Now, a lot of us have this, so don't take it as, like, if you see one thing.
I never get embarrassed when I'm complicated.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
Yeah.
No, it is a spectrum. Sometimes it feels weird, and the other times it doesn't.
Yeah, plus, again, the culture. In some cultures, it's not acceptable to be complimented as easily as other cultures. So it depends on the culture that you grow up
Like
in.
Americans like to be complimented more than other cultures, maybe.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Eye contact, something so basic that we think, oh, there must be like a biological imperative for making eye contact. In some cultures, that's considered rude to look somebody straight in the eye when you're talking.
It's almost like aggression in some cultures,
In
right?
some cultures, yeah. And some animals as well. So, on the contrary, if somebody develops autonomy, they're independent, not easily led, meaning they can think for themselves.
They don't join cults and,
Yes.
kind of believe everything they hear. They're kind of more discriminative and critical. They have that critical thinking.
Is able to stand on their own 2 feet, works well alone and with others. They're flexible, in other words. One of the biggest lessons I learned in clinical psychology, flexibility is sanity.
Oh, that is interesting. Yeah, because you always say when people are really rigid one way, it's almost like they're stuck, really stuck.
Well, because they're not going to be able to adapt to changes. And what is the nature of
Changes.
society, the world? It's always changing.
Well, the nature of life is if someone wants to, let's say, change and they want to do something different with their life or improve themselves, if they're rigid, it would be harder for that person to make those changes than someone who's more flexible. Yeah.
Yeah, and psychological rigidity simply means that you only have one defense mechanism or go-to strategy for everything, so that you always respond.
So you shut down every time, and and you run away. That's your
That's your
go-to.
go-to.
Or you get aggressive and angry. That's your go-to.
Yeah.
And it's like almost like you're acting not even out of your own will.
Yes, and flexibility means you assess the situation, the circumstance, and you say, what is the right response here? Should I be open, friendly, or resist? Should I be assertive? And that's one of the traits. You're assertive when necessary.
So the terrible twos is this time. They always talk about this, and that's where the child says no a lot. And so is that assertiveness where the mother's like, okay, Jimmy, it's time to go. And the kid's like, no, or they get kind of in tantrum. So what's the tantrum idea? And that age range is usually where the tantrum starts. From a psychological perspective, is that them building autonomy in a way that maybe they haven't fine-tuned like a communication style yet, but they're kind of trying to build that? And maybe it's not a bad thing to have that?
Yeah, it's communication, no doubt. It's saying, I have my own ideas. I don't want to go along with that. But of course, there's better ways to communicate. And often what parents do is they reinforce that behavior by paying attention,
soothing it
to the kid when they throw a tantrum. Now, of course, sometimes you have to pay attention to them because they're doing it in the middle of a store or something, right? But when you reinforce it and you don't understand what kind of the impact that your attention is having on the kid, parents often just keep that pattern going.
They like reinforce the
Yeah.
I have a tantrum, mom soothes me and treats me and to get me to stop, and then that works. So anytime I need something, and then as adults, how does that happen? The person in the office that's having the tantrum because they're not getting something, and then the boss soothes them, and it's like that same pattern.
Yeah.
They get all the attention, and they're making a noise, and that's how they get attention.
That's right. And there's a simple solution for that. You start to pay attention to the things they're doing well, when they're communicating the way you want them to communicate. You pay attention there. You reinforce that instead of the maladaptive behavior. But that's a whole other podcast.
But I'm talking about autonomy. It's like they're
right.
trying to find. They're not just going with their parent.
Yeah.
They're rebelling in a way, and that's it. It's natural for the child to rebel. It's part of it, a healthy part. But like you said, they don't have the communication skills yet, so that's what they know is cry. And so again, the parent reinforces the pattern. But what about so how does this all form the will as an adult? Like how does this really impact their relationship as an adult as far as autonomy? Do they, like you said, follow the crowd? Are they leaders? Are they always go to a job where someone tells them what to do and they're very comfortable in that methodical, like just tell me what to do? Or if someone may be more creative and innovative?
Yeah. So again, if you think of the foundation, when you build a house, if you don't have a good foundation, everything you build, no matter how beautiful and how perfect, is not going to be stable and well designed because it's on unstable ground. So these early years serve as the foundation to build your personality on, what Jung called the persona, the way you express yourself in the world, your relationship with the world.
And primarily, you're saying, again, the mother has a huge influence in both stages.
Especially early on, because those early experiences, they're recorded unconsciously, meaning the child simply absorbs those experiences emotionally, experientially, and says, "This is who I am." Right? If I get love and attention and everything, my needs are met, that must mean it's a great world. I can expect happiness. I can expect things to open up for me. I'm going to be a great person. Like that's the message that the child gets. On the contrary, none of us have a perfect relationship or a perfect life in those early years. But if most of the time there's our needs are met, there's love, we'll do fine. We're fine. When there is trouble, when there's divorce, when there's disruption, when there's abuse, when there's neglect, right? Lack of food, lack of love.
Or even shelter sometimes.
Lack of shelter, any of those things, or a combination of those things, we know those kids are in trouble and they have trouble catching up to the rest of the kids.
So that's why when kids come from a troubled family, they become more withdrawn. Their inability, it's harder for them to make friends, all those things. Yes. And so what's possible for someone who, let's say they had a tough, early life. Maybe they were in a country, they were coming across the, refugee or something really dramatic.
Well, you see these kids in Ukraine and
even Venezuela.
Climate refugees.
Yeah, and climate refugees. And so what's possible for them as an adult? So let's say that happened to them early in life and then they have these deep mistrust and the shame, like I can't do anything right kind of thing. I can't do anything on my own. I don't trust myself. Some people that like are entrepreneurs, they have a hard time putting themselves out there because they're afraid of criticism or really don't have confidence that they can do. They can create something. It's better to just follow. How can they change? How can they transcend this?
Yes, so the good news is neuroplasticity. For a long time, people thought, no, once personality is set, once those early experiences are set, and it's like cement, it dries and it's hardwired now, and you can't change that. But now we know that's not true. The brain is still malleable, meaning neuroplasticity, you can still change its function and structure through experience, through learning, through inner work.
So you can cultivate trust, you can cultivate autonomy, you can operate in your world without fearing shame or having that self-doubt. You can actually cultivate confidence and will and hope.
That's right. But it requires, of course, the individual to participate in their own transformation, what you call individuation. Because if the individual resists, right, if they say, well, I don't want to look at my past, or I don't want to look at my mind, I just want to focus on the external world and go out there and do my best, then they're not able to really experience that transformation, because it requires self-inquiry.
Going deeper than just even the conscious assumptions or examining your thoughts, but going deeper into the unconscious.
Yes, and now we're learning a lot from meditation and the study of meditation. It is this process of meta-awareness, meaning rising above our own thoughts and emotions and then working with them from that perspective, that we're not caught up in trying to fix ourselves or trying to correct some kind of damage, but we're seeing it more as if the brain and the mind is malleable, I can work with it. I can reshape it.
That's not who I am, right?
That's not who I am.
It's not a life sentence. And when you say meta-awareness, one of the philosophies that we, our foundation of our work is on Vedanta non-dual philosophy, which is that everything's consciousness, and that pure awareness is really who we are. And these things that we're talking about today, these stages of development, are happening on the ego level. They're not happening, the deepest level of us is not touched by any of these experiences. So what we want to do is not just rearrange the furniture. We can cultivate a new personality, use our neuroplasticity to realign the way we experience the world. But the true essence of us is not broken. And if we can tap into that deeper part, it makes this part, the surface part, easier. But if you identify that I'm this person, I had this happen to me when I was a child, and my mother, was a terrible mother, and that's why I'm the way I am, you'll always be fixed in that story. So it's all about transcending these patterns, not trying to just fix them. Yes. Understanding why you are the way you are, and it's not about just this current situation that's causing conflict in your life. It's seeing that this is a pattern that's been happening forever, and let's go into the root.
Yeah, usually what I tell clients and students is these things are very powerful. We know the mind is extremely powerful, but the power comes from us. We're the ones giving it.
I love that.
The power. And once you understand that, then you can work with the mind in the right perspective.
Like the mind is doing something, not doing something to you. It's doing something through you, but you have the power. It's coming from your power. I love that, Rob. That was great. Well, that's a great way to end this session. We will see you next week for our next episode, where we're going to talk about a little older, the ages of 4 to 6, 3 to 6, and then 7 to 10. Talking about more levels of change, stages of development, and how to look at your life and where you had the core of your personality and how to transcend it to have more love and more success in your life.
See you next time.
Take care, everyone.